Well, here we go with your Wednesday news and notes, and I've got two free selections for you. We tried it last week. We threw out two free selections. Both were winners, Miami defeating Virginia, Indiana defeating Rutgers. In fact, the last 2 weeks, these Phil Steele Plus Tour notes, or selections, I should say, 12-5. So let's get another big week coming up. Now, I will note, it's only an official selection. I may point out some things about games, but it's only an official selection when I point it out. As an example, last week on the Wednesday one, I said play on a streak. You can win many times, you lose only once. That was to play Duke over Georgia Tech, but I did not designate it as an official selection. It won, not counting it. Also, I mentioned that Wake Forest was ranked for the first time since 2008. And those teams hadn't fared well, but it wasn't designated as an official selection. Yes, Louisville beat Wake Forest, but not counting it as a win. Only when we targeted specifically, and there's two of them on today, two official selections for you, does it count as an official selection. Then, of course, on Friday, usually have 7, 8, or even 9 free selections for you on the Friday tape. But lots of interesting news and notes. Let's get to it. And we'll start off with that ranked the first time. And so far this year, teams that have been ranked for the first time in a long time are now 1-6 against the spread the next week. This week, the Minnesota Golden Gophers have not been ranked since 2014. They are now 6-0. They've entered the rankings. And to show you how they've done so far this year, you go back to week 1. Iowa State was ranked for the first time since 2005. Iowa State, that first week of the season, barely got past Northern Iowa. Week 3, Virginia. It was Virginia's turn in the spotlight, and Virginia was ranked for the first time since 2011. They were a 7.5-point favorite against Florida State, and if you look at the thing there, they trailed that game. They trailed that game late. Right here, they were down 24-17 in the fourth quarter. They scored 2 touchdowns in the last 6 minutes to win by 7, but did not cover. Maryland was ranked for the first time since 2013. Remember when Maryland's offense was thought of as unstoppable, 79 and 63 points. Ranked for the first time, ended up losing to Temple. Unfortunately, in week 4, we actually used a selection here on the Phil Steele Plus Tour, and it was to go against Cal, which was ranked for the first time since 2009. Well, they went on the road and beat Mississippi, giving us a loss here, but it was the only win all season for one of these rare ranked teams. You go back to week 6, SMU was ranked for the first time since 1986. Let's go take a look at SMU real quick. They were playing Tulsa. They did win by 6, but they were a bigger favorite than that, and they actually trailed that game 30-9. Week 7, well, that was last week, and Baylor was ranked for the first time under Matt Rule. And what happened? They needed overtime to get past Texas Tech, 33-30, did not cover. And Wake Forest last week had entered the rankings for the first time since 2008. And Wake Forest, click on that, they got beat by Louisville outright at home, 62-59. And once again, I love clicking on these boxes because they tell you how the game was played. Look at what the score was. It was 52-31 Louisville. Wake got a whole bunch of points late in that game to make it 62-59. So Louisville got the win on the road. And so the ranked teams this year, ranked for the first time in a long time, are just 1-6. And, of course, the one win is one that counted against us here on the news and notes. Now, I will point this out about Rutgers, and it's something I pointed out last week when we used Indiana as an official selection on Wednesday. Rutgers has a feeble offense in conference play. And when you use Phil Steele Plus, you go all the way back all these years, but you can see here they average 248 yards per game, 10 points per game in conference play. How about 227, 14 points per game in conference play? 246, 11 points per game in conference play. And then you get to this year, they are averaging 167 yards per game in conference play and 2 points per game. And go back to Minnesota for a minute. As much as they are in a tough situation this week, being ranked for the first time in a long time, their run game has got going. 332, 322 the last 2 weeks. That's impressive. And they're going against a rush defense that gives up 209 yards per game, 5.2 yards per carry. So that's not an official play, just something I want to point out. We'll keep bringing it up every time a newbie stops into these rankings, and it's something that's tough to handle. 1-6 so far this year. Let's get to an official selection. All right. I've got 2 of them on the tape. Let's get to the first one. And remember last week, on Friday, we gave you the NFL selection, which had partially to do with the home edge The Pittsburgh Steelers actually had the home edge against the Chargers. If you listen to the game, watch the game, it was almost like a Pittsburgh Steeler home game. Well, let's go to a college game this week that we can talk about that. And I usually put the visitor on the left, the home team on the right. So the visitor on the left is going to be Missouri. The home team on the right is going to be Vanderbilt. Now, Vanderbilt has a record of 1-7 against the spread as a home dog. And as you recall from earlier this year, remember I showed you the video of both the Georgia game and the LSU game and what the home crowd was like for there. It was actually Georgia dominated. It was like a Georgia home game. It was like an LSU home game as well. And Vanderbilt did not cover either of those. Well, this week they're playing Missouri. Missouri's in close proximity. I expect them to travel well for this game, probably have the crowd edge, especially after Vanderbilt just lost to UNLV at home, 34-10 in their last game. So there's a reason Vanderbilt's 1-7 against the spread. Georgia and LSU took over the field. Missouri should have the crowd edge here. And let's see what they did the last time they traveled here to Vanderbilt. That would have been 2017. Go back here, and I love these half times, by the way, as well. That's 2018. Here's 2017. At the half, Missouri led 35-0, had a 262 100-yard edge, ended up winning the game 45-17. I believe Vandy got some late points there. Nope, 45-17, that's legitimate. But at the half, it was 35-0. And here's something interesting I thought I'd point out about Missouri. They're a very under-the-radar 5-1 team. If you go to my Twitter account, I always post different things on there. Right now, I've got the average game grades. And look where Missouri is average game grades, 104.6. They are actually number 12 right now in the average game grades. And so you've got Ohio State, Wisconsin, Alabama, Oklahoma. And what the average game grades take into account, keep this in mind. They have no preset power rating on any team. So any team in the country that have played Ohio State's schedule and have done what Ohio State did against them would come up 124.6. There is no power ratings on Ohio State. It's only what you do, rushing yards, passing yards, both offense and defense, and then who you did it against, and it adds up the yards per game. Now, as you see in the opening game, they had a 537, 389-yard edge, but lost the game by 6, so they only had a 91.7 game grade in the opener. Since then, they've been all great game grades, dominating most of their foes. They're plus 212 yards per game on the season. They're beating foes by 23 points per game, and that is good enough to rank right here, up here with the Georgias, Utahs, Auburn, Penn State, Oregons. So do keep your eyes on Missouri. Average game grades say that. Like I said, last week we came on board with the Steelers over the Chargers as the NFL play, and that home crowd was definitely pro-Pittsburgh. I expect this home crowd to be pro-Missouri when this one rolls around. Now, you look at the lines this week, and there's a game that might have you questioning, why is 0-6 Rice favored against 2-4 UTSA on the road? Well, that's a good question. I'm glad you brought that up, and we'll take a look at that. We'll pop up the Rice page here, and we're going to pop up the UTSA. Now, they're 0-6, haven't won a game all season yet. Rice is a 4-point road favorite. UTSA's already won 2 games this year, beat UTEP on the road, so you're probably scratching your head. But if you look at this, Rice played Army, Rice played Wake Forest, and Rice played UAB. Well, they played the same 3 teams, Baylor, Army, and UAB. Adding it all up, though, Rice lost those 3 games by an average of 14 points per game. UTSA lost those games by an average of 29 points per game. In fact, Rice was only minus 112 yards per game in those games. Look at this. They only were outgained by 41 yards by Army, only by 104 yards by UAB. Meanwhile, when you look at UTSA, they're minus 216 yards per game. UAB outgained them by 272. Army by 98, Baylor by 280. So if you add it up in that respect, Rice has played much better against mutual opponents. Rice has taken on the 30th toughest schedule. Their other opponents besides those 3 were Texas, Louisiana Tech, and Baylor. Their other 3 opponents were Incarnate Word, or not Baylor. Baylor's one of the 3 they played. And their other opponents were Incarnate Word and UTEP. So much tougher schedule, number 30 versus 106, done much better against mutual opponents. And that's why Rice is favored in the game, despite the fact they're 0-6 and UTSA is 2-4 and at home. Let's take a look at a game where you guys know from going back from last year, if you followed the Phil Steele Plus tour, I like to line up a team that had a lot of green in the rush column and match them up against a team that had a lot of red in the rush defense column. And that's what you have here with Houston playing Connecticut this week. Now, it's not an official play. Just thought I'd point out a couple things about this game. First of all, I love it when you got a green team. They run the ball well, 241 6.0. Love it when they go up against a weak rush defense. Connecticut's actually got an improved rush defense. I mean, last year they were horrific. 335 yards per game, 7.7. Look at all that red last year. And that's the beauty of Phil Steele Plus. You see this stuff at a glance. You just put the teams, I always line the two teams up side by side. Look at the red here for Connecticut running the football. They struggle to run the ball. They've got some pretty good run Ds. Look at Houston. They've got 95, 49, 96 this year. They've played pretty good in that respect. And I was listening to some show somewhere, and they said, well, Houston has a horrible defense. And if you look at them, they are allowing 480 yards per game. But they're actually holding their opponents to 1 yard below their season average. They've played Oklahoma. They played Washington State. They've played some pretty good teams in Tulane, North Texas, and Cincinnati. And they're doing pretty well here. If you look, they're allowing basically what they come in, the opponent comes in averaging. So they've played a tough schedule this year. I think their defense is better than most folks think, allowing 480 yards per game. Connecticut, meanwhile, is giving opponents 33 yards per game above their season average. Their offense only 80 below. But my main thing I'm looking at here is a rush defense that's allowing 5.7 yards per carry versus an offense that's averaging 6 yards per carry. Houston's laying about 21 on the road here, but that's an interesting one to take a look at this week. Now, a couple other ones. Earlier in the year, I gave you a couple of games in the workbook plays on Friday. I just thought I'd mention to you, they're still going strong. UNLV is an away dog. If you look at UNLV as an away dog under their head coach so far, I mentioned in the early one when we did it week 1, I believe we did it here against Northwestern, and I mentioned at that point that UNLV as an away dog was 14-7. All other games were 9-18. So you got a 66% play on them when they're an away dog. They're only 33% when they're in any other role. Well, it's held true to form this year. 2-1 as an away dog. They upset Vanderbilt last week. And guess what? When they're not an away dog, they're 1-2, 33%. So add it all up, they're still 16-8 as an away dog and 10-20 in all other roles. They are an away dog this week, by the way, when they travel to face Fresno State. It'll be interesting to see if they stay true to form. And the one game they did lose, I do want to point this out. Go back to look at UNLV, and unfortunately it was a inside the press box play for me. UNLV, the one game they lost as an away dog this year, we click on it. It was against Wyoming. Go back to this Wyoming game. You look at the box score. This thing's 10-7 UNLV after the first quarter. They lost their top running back to injury. Then they lost their quarterback to injury, and the rest of the game just turned into a nightmare. Ended up getting blown out, but only they actually had 19-18 first down edge in the game despite losing their quarterback and running back. But that's how it works sometimes. That's why they call it gambling. UNLV, you were banking on the fact the quarterback and top running back, and by the way, their top running back, pretty good. Charles Williams averaging 6.6 yards per carry, 598 yards. He went out in the first quarter of that damn game when they were winning 10-7. The other page I wanted to point out to you, and it's one that, unfortunately, I used it week 1 in the NFL season. I haven't used it since, but I should have. I don't understand why I haven't been using the Vikings anytime they're a home favorite. Look at this home favorite record under Zimmer coming into the season. I pointed out when they played week 1 against Atlanta and used it as an official play that they were 19-5-1 in this role. Well, they won that game. They beat Oakland as a home favorite. They covered last week against Philadelphia. They're not a home favorite this week. I'll wait for next Thursday to use this one when they play Washington. But 22-5-1 as a home favorite is Mike Zimmer. You got to love that. And by the way, if you would like the workbook gives you these pages where you can fill it in during the season, gives you all these angles. I showed you the college angles as well. The college angles that go even deeper because they don't have the over-unders here, nor the 5-year. Let's go back to that UNLV one for a minute. UNLV, click on it. Look at all these angles that are listed on here. Versus top 10 teams, ranked teams, conference dog, conference favorite, conference underdog favorite. All these different roles last 10 years at a glance. It's 2 full pages on every team. And if you would like to get the workbook, you can save yourself $5 on it. Just go to the Phil Steele store and get it, and then it's right here. Type in the code word save 5PS, regular 4070, and with the code it's 3570. But let's get rolling on with some more stuff. And up on philsteele.com, it's not just about these tours. We also put up some great stuff during the week, and we've started to put them up now. You've got the strength of wins, pain of losses. This one tells you, now what happens here is you actually get credit for every opponent's FBS win that they have. And you also, if you do it by losses, for another example, if you lose to an undefeated team, there is no loss. You do not have a loss. Now, Notre Dame, for example, had 0 in this column until Georgia lost last week. Then they bagged a loss. But that's how that works. So down here, you might see an undefeated or a team that has a loss this year. Let's see if there are any that have a loss. Cincinnati. Cincinnati has 0 losses because Ohio State hasn't lost this year, and that's the only team they lost to. So that's interesting. Michigan, same thing. 0 losses. Their only loss was to Wisconsin, a team that hasn't lost. Florida has 0 losses because the only team they lost to, LSU, hasn't got a loss. But interesting up here, the strength of wins. Ohio State comes in at 20. Their opponents have won 20 FBS games this year, and you're probably saying, hey, Phil, LSU, this number 12 cannot be right. LSU has defeated Texas. They have defeated Florida. How can you come up with only 12 for LSU? And I had the same question. I thought it was wrong. You look at Georgia Southern, so we'll take a look quickly at Georgia Southern and see how that works. Georgia Southern has got 2 wins this year, but 1 was over Maine, so it doesn't count. 1 over South Alabama. So that's 1 FBS win. Texas. Now, Texas is going to help them out a lot here because Texas has got 4 wins over FBS teams. That puts them up to 5. Northwestern State doesn't count. It's an FCS foe. Vanderbilt, I can tell you off the top of my head, they've defeated 1 FBS team, Northern Illinois. That puts them up to 6. So let's get to Utah State and take a look at them. Utah State, and I'm just showing you this so you understand exactly how strength of thing works. Stony Brook doesn't count. San Diego State and Colorado State do, so that's 7 and 8 for LSU this year. And then Florida. Hey, Florida's got more than 4 wins for crying out loud, right? Well, guess what? 2 of them were against FCS foes. So Miami counts, UT Martin doesn't. Kentucky counts, Tennessee counts, Auburn counts. Towson does not count. So that puts you 9, 10, 11, 12. LSU gets credit for 12 wins over FBS foes because that is who they defeated. And that is how the strength of wins, pains, and losses works. So I had the same question about LSU only having 12. I guess that makes Ohio State's record pretty good. They've beaten foes that have won 20 games over FBS foes. Wisconsin, 17. Auburn is at 15, number 3 in this ranking. So they've actually beaten some teams out there, and if you look at Auburn, they do have credit for 1 loss this year because Florida has lost a game. So that's how that one works. And the other one I want to point up there, these daily blogs are right down here, is the offense and defense yards per game versus opponents for the NFL. Who's number 1 right now? The San Francisco 49ers by a large margin. New England's number 2. The Rams, despite their 3 losses, are still up here at number 3. Buffalo's got some losses this year. They're still up here at number 4. Naturally, at the bottom is Miami, Washington, Cincinnati. And look at this. Chicago Bears, minus 62. Now, this is the yards per game versus opponent averages. They come in number 30 on offense, averaging 95 yards per game below what their opponents normally allow. They're plus 32 on defense, but that's minus 62. So the Bears way down here at number 28. But these blogs are up for you. And we're also going to do a strength of wins, pain of losses for you for the NFL this week. So do make sure you check that out. Check out the daily blog. All this stuff is free on philsteele.com. The daily blogs are free every week, as are these YouTube tours. And remember, when you go to the YouTube tour, you can get your free selections. Just go ahead and click the like when you get there. Make sure you give it a share. What the heck? It's all free information like this video today. Make sure you subscribe and then get your free plays and leave me a comment. Let me know what you want. Kurt here wanted to see more in the NFL. That's why I'm going to give you more in the NFL this week. So do make sure you leave a comment, give us a like, subscribe, and, of course, hit the bell. Then we'll let you know whenever these things are up and available for you. All right, one quick angle for you I thought I'd take you through, and that is one I was reading in the Power Sweep newsletter, great gambling newsletter that's out there. And it's Matt Rule is 12-1 straight up his last 13 as an underdog of 7 or less. So that's Tom Herman type of territory. We're talking 12-1 straight up as a dog of 7 or less. Go back to his games at Temple. And once again, you've got all this at your fingertips. You could just go to last 40 years results for Temple. You want to see when Matt Rule was there? It's right down here. Rule was there 16, 15, 14, 13. And this is all on Phil Steele Plus. So then you go back to those 16, 15, 14 games. We'll just go through a few of them. They covered against Penn State. Oh, no, 6 is less than 7. So +3 against UCF, won outright. +6.5 against USF, won outright. And you could go back and do this yourself. Navy, +2.5, won outright. But it's amazing. 12-1 straight up the last 13 times as a dog is 7 or less. I bring that up because Baylor's a dog of less than 7 this week against Oklahoma State. We'll see if Matt Rule makes that 13-1. All right, let's get to your final one. And this one is an official play. 2 official plays on this Wednesday tape for you today. And this one, we're going to take a look at the UCLA-Stanford game, and it is a series history play. A series history play on the UCLA and Stanford game this week. And let's go ahead and click on Stanford. And a couple things I'll point out about the series as well. And when we click on this one, just go down to Stanford, and you get the complete series history. All you do is go to Schedule, click on this, and this is available. All 130 teams, every game, it's all available. Look at this. Stanford, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11 straight wins against UCLA. 10-1 against the spread. You got to like that. A couple other things that I like about this game that sort of magnified it, made me put it out here as a selection. Look at Stanford's defense at home this year. Now, it's completely different than on the road. On the road, they're giving up 513 yards per game. They gave up 492, 545, 501. But at home, they've played Washington. They've played Oregon. They've played Northwestern. Those are 3 pretty good teams. They're giving up 275 yards per game at home, 81 yards per game on the ground, 54% completions, playing to an average game grade of 101.2. UCLA, on the other hand, not so much. On the year, they are minus 106 yards per game on the season. That's all foes combined. They're just 1-5 coming in. And guess what? That one win was against Washington State. Once again, you click on the box score. They trailed that Washington State game 49-17. I think Washington State majorly relaxed. That's where UCLA got a bunch of their yards, points in that game, and actually pulled out their own win thanks to that. But as you can tell, their defense giving up 503 yards per game, 69% completions. And the amazing thing here, Stanford only a 6.5-point favorite at home for this. So an official play, Stanford is a series history play, minus 6.5. Your home crowd selection is Missouri, minus 21. And then I'll be back on Friday. I'll have at least 7 more plays for you. We'll get some FCS action going. We'll get some NFL action going for you as well. So make sure you check us out then. And also make sure you follow on Twitter. I think I showed you the average game grades already on Twitter, but when you go to Twitter and look at this stuff, I keep you updated on all the latest injuries. Look at all this injury information you get when you follow me on Phil Steele 042. That'll do it for your Wednesday update. I'll be back with you Friday morning. I'll have the Phil Steele Plus tour with selections, have at least 7 more plays for you. 12-5 the last 2 weeks. Let's hope we keep it rolling. And thanks for you watching.